Chosen one, what happened to you? You used to bend until you broke. You used to apologize for simply existing. You used to carry everyone's chaos just to keep the peace. But now, you say no without guilt. You speak your truth without shaking. You've got boundaries that shock people, and guess what? They can't handle it. They say you've changed, you're acting different, you've got an attitude now. Good. Because the version of you they could manipulate no longer exists. You didn't become heartless, you became whole. And the ones who only loved your silence will never survive your voice. Drop it in the comments if you're done being everyone's emotional sponge. Subscribe if you're ready to live in your truth unapologetically. And keep watching, because this is just the beginning of your rise. Part 1. The old you was the peacemaker. You didn't ask to become the peacemaker. It happened slowly, one quiet sacrifice at a time. You were taught that being good meant being agreeable. That love meant putting others first, even if it cost you your sanity. That harmony was more important than honesty, and that it was your job to keep the peace, even if it meant losing yourself. So you became the one who always said yes, even when your body screamed no. You answered every call, even when you were exhausted. You helped everyone else carry their burdens, even when your own were crushing you. You gave, forgave, and overextended, because deep down you thought that if you were useful enough, they would love you back. You were the caretaker, the fixer, the emotional sponge. You smiled through discomfort. You tolerated mistreatment. You mastered the art of silence just to keep the room calm. And the people around you, they didn't see you as a soul with needs. They saw you as support, a cushion, a backup plan, someone who would never say no, because you didn't have boundaries. You had fears. Fears like, if I speak up, I'll be abandoned. If I ask for more, I'll lose everything. If I take up space, I'll be too much. So you made yourself small. You buried your truth to protect theirs. You became the glue, not because it made you whole, but because everyone else would fall apart without you. But while you were busy saving others, no one noticed you were drowning. You weren't living. You were surviving. You felt invisible, empty, used, until one day, something shifted. Not an explosion, not a breakdown, but a quiet, divine rebellion. You woke up and said, no more. You realized that real love doesn't ask you to betray yourself. You realized that peace without truth is just a performance. And you realized that the version of you they loved wasn't you. It was your compliance. So you stopped trying to prove your worth. You stopped sacrificing your soul to make others comfortable. And you chose something radical. You chose yourself. Not with vengeance, but with clarity. Not to hurt them, but to finally heal you. And that moment, that was the beginning of your rebirth. Part 2, your boundaries are shocking them. Now that you've changed, they don't know what to do with you. They're stunned, confused, uncomfortable. They call you different, as if that's a bad thing. They say you're acting brand new. They accuse you of being distant, or worse, cold. But let's get something clear. You're not difficult. You're disciplined. You're not mean. You're measured. You're not arrogant. You're aware. You finally stopped betraying yourself for people who only showed up when it was convenient for them, and that has them shook. Why? Because the version of you they once had unlimited access to no longer lives here. The you who said yes when you were exhausted? Gone. The you who tolerated crumbs and called it connection? Gone. The you who accepted bare minimum just to keep someone close? Long gone. Now, you return calls when your spirit says yes, not out of guilt. You leave draining messages on read without a second thought. You stop the conversation when it turns toxic, without needing to explain yourself. This new version of you, calm, grounded, unshakable. But they're not used to this energy. They're used to your availability, not your authenticity. They're used to access, not accountability. They're used to you being the emotional doormat, not the divine boundary setter. So now that you've flipped the script, they're losing control. They call it an attitude. They say you've changed. They try to guilt you back into the box they built for you, but you don't fit anymore, and you're not shrinking to make them comfortable. They don't know how to love a person with boundaries because they only knew how to love your self-abandonment. And as your vibration rises, their access declines. Not because you're better than them, but because you're better to yourself. They either rise to meet your standards, or they fall out of your orbit. Either way, you're not folding, you're not bending. You're not going back to being a version of yourself that suffered in silence. Let them be shocked, because while they're busy gossiping about the new you, you're busy protecting your peace, and peace is priceless. Part 3. Boundaries are not walls, they're bridges. Let's clear something up once and for all. Boundaries are not walls, they're not meant to shut people out. They're meant to show people the door to healthy connection. You're not rejecting anyone, you're redirecting them from chaos to clarity, from disrespect to respect, from access to alignment. Because here's the truth, you're not saying, I don't want you in my life. You're saying, if you want to be in my life, this is the way. That's not cruelty, that's courage. You're not punishing anyone, you're protecting your peace. You're teaching people how to treat you, not by raising your voice or seeking revenge, but by standing rooted in self-respect. The old version of you, they feared confrontation like it was fire. You stayed silent just to avoid conflict. You chose discomfort for yourself so others could remain comfortable. But the healed you, you're not afraid of awkward conversations if it means safeguarding your soul. You've learned that no is a full sentence. That real love never asks you to break yourself to be accepted. And guess what? You no longer crave a crowd. You're not collecting people. You're curating alignment. You're done with the half-loves, the conditional connections, the ones who only showed up when it served them. Now, you value quality over quantity. You embrace solitude when the energy isn't right. You're loyal to your peace more than your people-pleasing patterns. You've stopped over-explaining, you've stopped shrinking, you've stopped apologizing for having needs, standards, and sacred space. And some will call it pride, but this isn't arrogance, this is alignment. And here's the beauty, the right ones won't be offended by your boundaries. They'll respect them, they'll admire them, they'll meet you there, because real connection doesn't require you to sacrifice your self-worth. So don't fear who walks away. That's not rejection, that's revelation. It's life clearing the stage for the people who are always meant to be in your corner. Boundaries don't burn bridges, they build better ones. And you're finally crossing into a version of yourself that feels free, full, and fiercely protected. Part 4. The rise of the authentic. You're finally here, in your truth, in your power, in your authenticity. Not the mask you wore to survive, not the polite version of you who smiled through pain, not the exhausted soul who kept saying, I'm fine, when you were barely holding it together. No more hiding, no more performing, no more shrinking yourself just to be palatable. Now, you're real, raw, radiant, unfiltered, and unapologetic. You've stopped performing for approval. You've stopped twisting your spirit into shapes just to make others comfortable. You no longer explain your intuition, you trust it. You've stopped negotiating with your soul for crumbs of connection. Now you walk boldly in your truth, even if it means walking alone. You speak up when it's uncomfortable. You say no when it doesn't serve your peace. You make decisions rooted in alignment, not obligation. And the result? You glow differently. You move differently. Your energy is magnetic, not because you're forcing it, but because you're finally in flow with who you really are. This version of you, aligned, whole, lit from within. You've stepped into a timeline where self-worth is your currency. You know your value, and you don't need a crowd to confirm it. You don't chase, you attract. You're not waiting for permission anymore. You are the permission. You're not asking to be chosen. You are the chosen one. And yes, your rise is making waves. Some people are inspired by you. They're awakening because of your example. They see your strength and it gives them hope. Others, they're intimidated. They liked you better when you didn't know your worth, when you were easier to manipulate, easier to mold. And some, they're angry, not because you hurt them, but because they can no longer control you. But none of that matters now, because you're finally free. Free from old identities, free from toxic cycles, free from the version of you that lived for external validation. You didn't just change, you remembered. You remembered who you were before the world told you who to be. And now you're becoming everything you were born to become. Authentic, powerful, unstoppable, chosen one. Take a deep breath. You didn't come this far just to remain small. You didn't rise from the ashes of your old self just to dim your light again. This version of you, and the one with boundaries, with self-respect, with clarity, is not only valid, it's divine. Let the world be shocked. Let them whisper, let them walk away, because anyone who's uncomfortable with your healing was benefiting from your hurting. You are no longer available for chaos. You are no longer available for one-sided relationships. You are no longer available for anything that costs you your peace. You are now aligned with a higher frequency, a life that honors your soul, your truth, and your sacred energy. So protect it. Speak your truth. Walk with confidence, even if your voice trembles, because every time you choose yourself, you teach the universe how to show up for you. Now it's your turn. Drop it in the comments if you're done shrinking yourself for others. Share your story. How are you reclaiming your power? Like this video if it hit your heart. Subscribe for more soul deep truth every week. And remember, you didn't lose them. You found yourself. And that was the real win all along.